Welcome to the K-Factor podcast, where we explore the real journey behind success, the struggle, the growth, and the lessons that shape who we become. I'm Rabbi Yehoshua Wordy, director of CHYE, a nonprofit dedicated to helping entrepreneurs and career seekers build the Keli for their parnasa and a life of purpose. Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of the K-Factor podcast. Very excited this month to be interviewing an entrepreneur that I've had the pleasure of watching him from a distance through his journey. Very exciting, very talented person. This is our guest, Mendel Erlenwein. We'll talk about him a little more in a second. As always, with the K-Factor podcast, this season has been sponsored by Ainsworth and Gorkin LLP, amazing business lawyers. For anyone that needs a business lawyer, highly recommended. So Mendel is somebody who grew up in Toronto.
That is true. Went
through the Yeshiva system, lived in Crown Heights for a while. Actually met him close to 10 years ago or when he was a chazan. He davened, we had a minyan for Rosh Hashanah, and he davened beautifully. And I saw right away he's a person of charisma and charm.
And I thought you were going to say a person of interest.
Yes. He moved his way into the healthcare space. And he built up a healthcare company. He also became an influencer. If you guys Google him, you'll see on LinkedIn, he does all these interviews, and he's made his way around interviewing top people. If I recall correctly, you even interviewed a very wealthy guy, Mark Cuban. Yes, is that
Mark Cuban? Yeah. More so, fun. We just had Dr. Oz on, so that was fun.
Okay, so this is top level stuff, and today he's the CEO of his company. You want to tell everyone about your company?
Sure. The company is called CareCo. We're an AI platform for care teams. Care teams we refer to as the folks that kind of sit between the doctor and the patient. So focusing on preventive care, care management, care coordination. And we have an AI augmentation platform that helps them with intelligence, workflow, analysis, visibility, and just make sure that they can get more done with less.
That's awesome. He's right in on the AI curve, jumping in, trying to, this is the time when if you get it right with AI, this is the new generation. But before we talk about the current in our classic style, we like to go back, rewind, and go back to the beginning of time, because that's our goal here. We want to share with people that journey, that transition, coming out of yeshiva, getting into the business world. So talk to us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your early years as you came out of yeshiva.
Yeah, and I'm going to mix this maybe with a couple things. You shot over some general points and maybe some things that are towards the end of the conversation, but I don't talk about this stuff often because I don't. The crowd that I kind of grew my career through has just been, regular, like the not Jewish side of healthcare, just regular primary care, no nursing homes, no long-term care. So this isn't the typical audience. So excited to chat today. For young guys that are coming out of yeshiva and wanting to just do something, I'll never forget that period in my life. So I was in Oli Torah, not enjoying it at all. Chani Leshus over there was actually super understanding, and he let me work for part of the day. And the point of me working then was to hopefully then be like to kind of ground the rest of my day. But I realized pretty quickly that it just was my entire day. Or like I was excited then, and then I was not excited before and not excited after. And so that's when I decided to go and just, go work full time. And I had this whole plan. I went back to Toronto. I had this whole plan of exactly what I was going to do. And of course, none of it worked out. And so for a period of time, I was just thinking, I had no idea what I was going to do. And I had these big plans, and I would literally get like physical heart pain, like I don't know if it's mini panic attacks or I don't know what it was exactly, but I would have to it came from me thinking about like where I wanted to be, and then immediately contrasting that with not only am I so far away from that, I don't even know how I'm getting there. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people coming out of yeshiva have, because they're just like, okay, I'm not even on a path. Like, I don't even know, the regular kids, let's say they go to college, which I'm not a proponent of. I mean, I don't care for one way or another, but like they go to college, at least they think they have a path, if that path works out or not. But they think they're on some sort of path. When you're coming out of yeshiva, you're like, all I know is I want to make money. If I was going to become a shliach, I know exactly the path to get there, right? If I was going to become a teacher, I know exactly the path to get there. If I want to go make a bunch of money and be a good supporter of the Jews, then I have no idea like where we're going, and that can cause a lot of anxiety. And the two things that I think I would like. So one of the questions you have later is like, what you would tell yourself, and I think about this pretty often. Which, if you are, I think it's a very important message. If you are somebody that is having literal like physical heart pain and anxiety because you want to get there so badly and you don't even know how you're going to get there, you are going to be okay. Like, you are going to get there because you are the person that is like the person who's completely oblivious and doesn't care. They're the person who needs to be worried. The person who's like literally like so concerned about how to get on the path. You may not know what path you're on. You may not have a path in front of you. But if you're the person that is like that obsessed with it, then you are going to find a path. So that doesn't mean like, stop worrying about it and relax. No, you should worry about it and you should go figure it out, but it just take the edge off. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you're so concerned about it is gonna do you really well, I think, down the line. And the other thing that's impossible to know when you're young is that things work out. And you don't know that because you don't have any perspective. I have this theory that you can only see ahead of you the amount of time that you see behind you, the amount of time that you have behind you in business. So if you're starting at like level 0, you literally have zero perspective to look back on that you can like overlay over your future and start making, informed decisions. So you kind of just have to trust some good people and trust the process and just say, hey, I'm going to figure this out one step at a time, and just focus on movement. So just one action at a time. So coming back to my story, I ended up moving to LA within a couple months, and I started just like drop shipping was like the thing then. It was like the hype thing, like what today is the AI is the hype thing.
It was the Wild West.
Yeah.
Everyone was trying to find the product.
Yes. You remember those days? This is like 10, 15 years ago. I picked the military niche, and I, ended up, understanding just like learning Facebook ads, and built a Shopify store, and was like, putting out this, like, there was one bag that was like selling. It was basically a fanny pack, but we called it a tactical pouch. And it was selling. And so around that time, I got to know somebody in LA who had a skincare company, and he wanted me to come kind of do that for him. So like build up his brand. And so I did that. And then I fell into healthcare. So I got to know someone else in LA who had a pretty successful group of companies in the healthcare space. And so I was chatting with him. He's like, what do you want to do for a living? I was like, oh, I'm going to build a marketing company. And he was like, okay, why don't you start a marketing company for my healthcare companies? And then if you get more clients, then you can do that. So I said, great. So started with him. I was basically making like a super, super base salary with the expectation of like getting clients and making more money. But the slight issue was I had no idea what I was selling. Not a clue. And as such, I couldn't really sell it. So I could do the work like for his companies because it was very defined. It was like, okay, this one needs a brand. This one needs a website. And I'm a pretty creative person, so I was able to pull that together. But I couldn't like effectively communicate a value proposition to other people to land clients because I did not know what I was actually selling.
That was around the time when you did a workshop for us on marketing, right?
That was, yeah. So I was only able to do that workshop around branding because I had at least done that once. That was the one thing I sold, was actually a branding package. So I at least understood that enough to like do some sort of something with you guys. But overall, it did not work out. And so maybe like 2 years after that, in the meantime, I'd gotten married. I moved to New York. That's when we did that thing. So that kind of ended. And then I went to I was thinking of getting into a different industry. I was thinking of getting into like the stroller space, and I built a whole brand and a whole thing around that. And then I was speaking to a business mentor of mine that I think someone I love and adore, Israel Rappaport. And yes. he
amazing entrepreneur and mentor.
Yes, literally one of the best people out there with like incredible vision and clarity. And he told me a lot of things, but he basically told me two things. He said, there's a certain hashgacha pratis to the industry that people find themselves in and like land in. And in my experience, if you landed in an industry, stick to that industry. So you find yourself in healthcare, just be in healthcare. That's number one. Number two is he told me, look, every business has a black swan event. Like every business has a thing that you can't foresee coming that could take out your whole business. He's like, in this space in particular, I can name you the 4 things that will kill your business. So he's like, why start fresh in a thing that, and he explained whatever, regulatory and materials and all this kind of stuff. And so that day I went home and I shut down the whole thing. I'd put probably like 6 months of work into it. I had the website up. I had branding and product and everything ready to go, shut the whole thing down. And I said, okay, I'm going to stay in healthcare. And so a couple months after that, he actually texted me. So I was following up with him. We were hanging out, and Israel messaged me one day, and he's like, "Hey, I've got this company that someone started, and it kind of turned into it. It had like just gotten started, but it wasn't really taking off. The company was losing money, had very limited clients and limited patients, and it was a care coordination company." And he said the guy that started it needed to move on and pay his bills, and so if you want to take a crack at it, happy to. So I said, cool. So that was really the start of the company that was, I'd say, the main part of my life for the last 7 or 8 years.
So he gave you the opportunity to come in right at the top as the the CEO, I guess. Of the company.
It was a one-man band. There wasn't really a top. So the company, it was the top and the bottom at the same time. The company was doing care coordination services, but all the actual care was outsourced to a third-party company. So I called it basically an invoicing company because you're just trading invoices between your clients and your vendors. And so it was quite interesting. I took it over, made it profitable pretty quickly, and then about a year in, I started bringing everything in-house. Go ahead.
Let's slow that down, because that was like you said a lot in one sentence. I took it over and made it profitable quickly. So let's from a business lesson standpoint, for people that are starting relatively new businesses, what type of things did you fix, and what lessons can be learned from there?
Sure. So the biggest lesson that I can learn from that is it was an industry that I was brand new to. I didn't know anything about it. But I knew enough to like not accept the status quo and to ask questions. And so it was one of the reasons why it was losing money was because the internal like mechanics of the company were just not scalable. And I'll give you one example. The way to do these services is you have to enroll patients in the service and you have to get in touch with them. Now, before you get in touch with them, you have to determine who is eligible for these services. And that's going to be based on their chronic conditions and their insurance. What was going on is the system that was being run before is every single day the person running the company would log into the EHR, which is like the electronic health record that has the schedule for the day of every single clinic that was a client. They would open up every single patient that was coming in that day, check for eligibility, so open their chart, look around their chart. If they were eligible, they were then coming over to an Excel sheet, searching for that patient in the Excel sheet to see if that patient was already on service. And then if the patient was not on service, they were then leaving a note for the doctor to hopefully mention the program to the patient. Okay. Doing that every single day, opening up every single patient. So basically you're working all day for each day and you could not get past that day. Right. And that was one thing where I just came in. I'm like, look, I don't know anything about this, but I know that it's 2019 and there's no way that I can't figure out a way to run like a report of like who's coming in. And so within, I don't know, 2 weeks, I had a report being ran out of these electronic health record systems, which by the way they're not very tech friendly platforms. So it was a bit of a learning curve to figure out where to get the report from. And then being brand new to Excel, but I learned about, VLOOKUPs and different formulas I was able to run. And basically I was now doing the work of an entire week in about 2 hours. So I was just pulling the report for the entire week, running an automatic formula on who was coming in, who was already on service. And then boom, I already had my patients. The next thing was taking the process away from the doctors and moving that ball into my court. So I'm like, okay, I'm now hoping, my bottleneck is the fact that I'm hoping that the doctors remember to explain about this program to this patient and then remember to communicate it back to me. That I'm not in control now of my business. And so the next thing was to move that process over to us. And a part of that was also switching vendors. So even though I wanted to bring everything in-house, one of the first things that we did was move the actual care over from the vendor that was not performing to someone that would perform better. So between those 3 things, we were able to start ramping up the business pretty quickly. I never took a cent from the investors from when I took it.
That's great. That's amazing. Where do you attribute your ability to make those adjustments? How did you? Was it just something that came natural to you? Did you grow up watching these types of things? How do you? Where do you attribute your ability to do those types of adjustments from?
I don't know. I think it's just like a mixture of curiosity and trying to think out of the box. And I think that comes from the way we all grow up. I mean, whether it's like, I don't know, whether it's that play in camp that you've like improved and built sets around and no one taught you how to build a set, you know, or like act, or like, I don't know, whether it's like camp or yeshiva or mitzvayim or like all the things that we do growing up, we're constantly being creative and thinking out of the box and just getting things done, and very typically with very limited resources, right? And so I think that those kind of behaviors work well when you're in that setting, and then probably need those behaviors skipping forward. Those behaviors probably need to be intentionally shed as you kind of mature in business, obviously, because at some point, you know, you need to have more structure and more, you know, you're not thinking, you know, you're not trying to kind of fly by the seat of your pants. But
I actually want to get to there soon, though. But before we jump to that, because I think I want to talk a lot about that in a second. At this point now, a year or two into this business, now that you've taken it over and it's, you know, you've stabilized it and so on and so forth, were there any like big struggles or turning points that happened that you had to deal with?
Oh, many. When I took over the company, there were 2 clients. That was the entire business. And I started the process of figuring out sales. I wasn't super sure of my capabilities, being that I couldn't sell the marketing thing that I didn't understand. But the lesson that I learned from not being able to sell marketing is I need to understand what I am doing. So step 1 was bringing everything in-house. And that itself was a massive learning curve. So I got the business to a kind of like a relatively stable point. And to Israel's like absolute credit, I'll never forget this conversation. I basically called him. I'd moved to Kingston, Pennsylvania. I literally was like a retired old man. I had a pool in my backyard. I would sit out there in the pool in the summer. I had nothing to do because all the actual care was being done by this other company. So I had to put out like 2 fires a month. Like what was I doing? And it was like really, really boring. And so I called up Israel and I said, look, I think we're doing a good job of like succeeding at level 1, but it would be so much more fun to like fail at level 10. Like, let's burn this thing down, but let's do it. Like, let's make a big fire, you know? So wouldn't that be more fun? So I said, let's start bringing everything in-house now. Let me start hiring people. And, you know, best case scenario, we do great. Worst case scenario, you lose whatever money you put in. And Israel's like, absolutely. Like, let's go for it. Like without even like a second's hesitation. And so I was like, cool. So I start the process of hiring people in. That was its own wild story that we could probably do like an hour podcast on, because again, no idea how to hire people. I'm like interviewing people at a Starbucks because I didn't have an office, and I'm like, you know, trying to figure this out. Finally, I realized that's not working. I got to get an office and then interview people. So slowly start building a team. And again, like Israel's advice to me through this whole time is like, I'm telling you right now, you are 100% going to make hiring mistakes, 100%. And for those that haven't done this transition, like going from never hiring somebody to hiring people, there's a lot. Like there's paperwork and HR, you're setting up payroll and you're setting up like onboarding processes. And like there's a lot that's going on. We're not talking about like, you know, 1099 people, oh, I'll pay you, you know, whatever. I'm talking about proper building a company. And so that was its own, that was its own learning curve. And he's like, you are 100% going to make mistakes. Just keep moving, keep making decisions. You know, that's it. And that was obviously
Let's pause that for 1 second. So what's a tip for making a good hire?
That is the tip. The tip is you will make bad hires. And once you realize that you 100% will make bad hires, the most important thing is just do the hires. And obviously like hire fast, fire faster, whatever. Hiring is something that you need to build. You need to build like, you know, like a gut, like you need to build an intuition for, a sixth sense for. And you're not going to do that by not trying and failing. You're never going to come out the gate and just know how to hire people. My first employee was my top employee who built the business by my side for about 6 years and she was phenomenal until she wasn't anymore. And she's no longer with the company. We kind of like grew past her, and that's its own lesson. But she was like literally Hashgacha Prata. She happened to, my first hire was like the person. But you know who wasn't? My second, my third, my fourth, my fifth, my sixth, like those people all didn't work out pretty quickly, and whatever. But by the time we ended up selling the company, we had about 30 employees. So you know, you just have to learn those things. Just do it.
That's great. That's great. So then, when you're running a company by yourself or with a few people, it's one type of business. When you have 20, 30 people, the dynamics of the business change tremendously. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, so you have to constantly evolve as a manager and as a leader from like the person that does everything. If you can't get yourself past doing everything, you're never gonna grow, right? So
Well, I would just say from CHYE experience, there are people that have it's a real challenge going from being a solopreneur to being a manager. There's even this famous book E-Myth, right, where he's like you started the business because you were passionate, and then all of a sudden now you have employees and you're not involved in the in the creation of the business. You're on top. So a lot of people struggle with that. How were you able to navigate that?
um, I think just constantly I think if you're conscious that you need to evolve, then it makes it easier to evolve. If you're not conscious that something needs to take place, and then again, like a lot of the stuff just comes down to me chatting with Israel as a mentor, and he always really like kept me in good stride, but and then just executing. But yeah, I mean, for me, I think naturally I'm a fairly good delegator. So for me, it came. I think the evolution was pretty easy. I've definitely seen other people struggle pretty considerably with it, and then some people just can never break out of that thing. Like they have to keep stepping back in. But I think you have to look at yourself as like, you always need to be leveling up, and your job when you're the only person, your job is to do everything. And by the way, there's the opposite as well. I've also seen entrepreneurs that like go raise some money and they like have a team and they're like, oh, I don't do this because my team does this. And and sometimes I'm talking to people, I'm like, your entire business right now is dependent on this one thing. This is not the thing you delegate. This is the thing that you need to go figure out because you are the founder and like you are the person that is at the end of the day holding the line on this business. So there's the opposite too. Like don't over delegate and put yourself in an office and be like, oh, whatever, I have a team for this thing. Like you also need to know that when you're at those lower levels, you need to figure out your business. Don't go delegate away your business problems, but you should always be the person taking care of the top one or the top few business problems, and that should evolve. If your top business problem when you have 10 employees is still the same problem than when you were just yourself, then you are not delegating. Like you're not, yeah.
So from listening to you, it clearly sounds like aside from your natural business acumen that you clearly have in you, you benefited a lot from having a mentor as real by your side. Like how often would you speak to Ezreal when you were building the business?
Um, on average, probably 4 times a week.
Okay, so it was a lot.
Yeah.
If somebody feels like they're solo, how would you recommend them finding a mentor, or like what would you say they should do to
Yeah,
have?
that in itself is a step, and it takes effort. Like you got to go find people that you consider to be successful, and then go and attach yourselves. Like you're gonna have to put effort into creating a relationship. Like these things are not just gonna magically happen. There's no like magic shul where all the mentors and mentees get together and have a speed dating process. You know what I mean? Like that's not a thing that I'm aware. Maybe CHYE will institute a speed dating.
Yeah, plugging in CHY for those of you listening, we do help with mentorship. That's one of our core services for sure.
Nice.
But that's amazing. Um, let's talk a little bit about you put yourself out there. I watched you on LinkedIn and all your interviews. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was pretty simple. I felt that I should be more relevant online. I think that like basic marketing 101, and I did pick up a thing or two from my little stint in marketing. And I think that you realize that your buyers are not always buyers, so they don't need your product every day, but there's one random day that they will need your product or service. And you need to make sure that the stars align, that when they need your product, they think of you. And in order to do that, you have to stay top of mind and always kind of be out there. And so I wanted to start putting out content. Didn't think I was smart or knowledgeable enough to constantly put out smart things every day. So I was like, okay, well, if I get other people to come on that are super smart, and then I talk to them, I'll get like, the brand, I'll be able to build the brand. I'll be able to chat with these guys, and I'll be able to put that out online, and I'll get to learn for myself, because also, again, new industry, didn't really know much. So that's really how it started. There weren't many podcasts in my space when I started. So this was about, I don't know, 4 years ago or something. Started doing a bunch of them, and after a few, maybe like a year in or so, I had this guy, Dr. Mike, on, who's like some like the number one social media doctor. So he's got like a lot of followers. So his face is like a scroll stopper, because there's everyone that we've had on the podcast is like extremely successful and extremely, powerful in healthcare, but very few are scroll stoppers where like people will know their face.
Was it hard to get to these people? Like you had to work for this, or they just responded to your emails?
Yeah, you always got to work. I mean, him. I think I tracked down his like producer or manager and like harassed him for. I don't think it was that long. I think it was just like. Also, you have to position it. So I remember he was just starting his own podcast then, and I had branded myself as the number one podcast in value-based care because there was no one else in value-based care. So I said I'm the number one in value-based care. And so when I saw he was trying to launch his own podcast, I'm like, hey, I'm going to help you launch your podcast, Mr. with 20 million, followers on whatever YouTube or whatever he has. So I think that was the pitch. Whether they bought it or not, I don't know. But we ended up doing it in person, brought out a production crew, drove down to Brooklyn. It was crazy. I had like kidney stones that day, and I'm like driving in a storm down to New York, and I'm like, this is great. I'm trying to do this interview. It was like blizzarding at me. And I'm like, I got one hand on the wheel. It was a good time. So I got down there, got the interview done. And then one of those clips kind of blew up and passed a million views. Now it's at like 4 million views. And that kind of fed a lot of eyeballs to the channel. So today I think we recently hit like 10 million views on the channel. And we have like 11,000 subscribers, but it made us kind of a brand, a so to speak household name in. Granted, there are very few value-based care houses, but in my space, which is what is meaningful to me, most people see our stuff.
So, which channels did you use? What your main viewership was on which platform? YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Like, where did you?
Yeah, so YouTube is just like I think is just my favorite go-to, just because it's like audio, video, whatever. And then we had it on, we use Buzzsprout as like a hosting site. We recently switched over to Spotify so we can upload the video there as well. But that pushes out to basically all the audio platforms. So we're basically everywhere and YouTube, essentially.
Nice. And doing that was a successful strategy for bringing in clients that you found that too?
Yeah, but yes, but it's very, very, very difficult to like draw the line. I remember I have a friend, who like when the channel took off after like the Dr. Mike thing, and then it started getting impressive. He was like, he's like, you know what, Mendel? He like comes over to me and he's like, now I get it. Like when you first started, I was kind of like, to myself, I was like laughing, like, oh, what are you doing? You're like talking on camera, no one's listening, blah, blah, blah. But now I get it. And I remember laughing to myself because I was like, no, you don't get it. Because I don't care. There's no difference to me now or when I was doing it before. I had a very, very, very simple, metric of success that I was looking for. I was looking to create content and put it out so it should go out every day. I never did it for views. I never did it for clicks. I never did it like for like the fame or influencer objective. And therefore, and I think that's really important because that's why I was able to do it for a full year and a half or 2 years before it kind of took off, so to speak. Because I wasn't doing it for that. So I never felt like it was failing. I felt like I was succeeding because for me to succeed at what I wanted to succeed at, nobody needed to watch it. Nobody. I just needed clips to put on LinkedIn and I needed to learn for myself about the industry. And that's why I did it. So to me, it never really mattered. Does it definitely help? Yeah. We just put together a conference next to the White House in DC. We had 15 million patients represented in a room of like 150 people. And we had every top government official in healthcare come and speak. And it was like just an over the top, incredible conference. And a lot of those relationships are from this. And so, yeah, it definitely, but it's the long game. You have to play the long game.
So just first of all, it's amazing. Just for strategy for anyone listening to this, you got some very, like you said, you just interviewed at this conference, Dr. Oz, which is, the top, was that hard to reach him?
So Dr. Oz everyone up until Dr. Oz came to the conference, like his whole team came to the conference. He came separately on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And I'm actually going back down to DC on Thursday to HHS headquarters in their fancy studio over there. We're having Dr. Tom Keene on, who's not as well known, but he's a big deal as well. So, I mean, you start building relationships. It's funny because the top two people in this part of the government, which is called CMMI, which is the Innovation Center for Medicare and Medicaid, they happen to be Jewish, and one of them even wears a yarmulke. Okay, like the top guy, like Dr. Oz's number one guy. And it's so funny because people probably just assume that like I know them from the synagogue, and I did not know these guys at all before they were in these positions. I didn't even realize that this guy, Abe Sutton, was like from and wore yarmulke. I reached out to him to just like come on the podcast, and we started getting that set up. And each time I'm like leveraging previous podcasts. So the way I actually got them on was about a year and a half ago. A Democratic congressman reached out and he said, "Hey, I love the podcast. I'd love to come on." Well, his media people reached out. And so this guy is like a total firecracker Democrat, like raging hatred of everybody, like Trump and Elon and like the whole shebang, right? Great guy, by the way. And so I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. Of course. So we go down to Congress and we go down to like the congressional like office buildings. We set up in his office and we do the podcast, and like we had fun. Like I went back and forth with him. Like I wasn't letting him, like I'm not there to be hostile, but I was there to have a dynamic conversation. We certainly had one. I recommend everyone goes and checks out just the trailer of it because my guy edited it like really well and it's like really funny. But he's going off on everybody, how everyone's fraud and this and Elon's dumb. And I'm like, how can you say anyway, it was a fun conversation. So, but then when I had that done, I went to the other side of the aisle, the people that I really wanted to have on. I was like, hey, you can't let this like stand because now we've platformed this like super like, aggressive view of you guys. And I need somebody from your side who's at least the same stature to come and answer. So that's what I was doing. So I was hitting up like all like the top people in the government on the Republican side to be like, I need somebody to answer here. And so we ended up having Abe Sutton on. But my point is, I didn't know he was from until he was already scheduled to come on the podcast. And the CEO of like a super big health system who's on my board at Careco, like sent me a picture of him. He was like at an event where he was speaking. This guy Epson was speaking. He sends me a picture of him. And he's like, "Oh, do you know him?" And I realized he had a yarmulke on. I'm like, "Oh my God!" So yeah, I had no idea. But you just got to reach out to people. Reach out, and that's it.
It's awesome. Talking about yarmulkes and walking in the halls of power, so to say. What's been your experience as a chassid, swimming in the business world outside of our community?
It's a really like, I mean, obviously to us, it just comes natural, relatively speaking, because we grow up this way. So for us, it's not really a big deal. But to everyone else, it really is a big deal. And I get countless messages and people come up to me at conferences and like, oh my God, like, I'm Jewish or even from, but I don't wear a yarmulke in public. And like to see someone on stage with a yarmulke, to me, it's always like, it's not an intentional decision. So to me, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm so happy I did this. But it is fun to like set up, tefillin booths at these things, like where I'm speaking at these like big conferences. I had a funny story once. I was speaking on a panel with a couple other guys, and the guy next to me is a Jewish guy. And he his company was worth like 1.2 billion or something. And it was my first time meeting him. But I knew who he was. I knew he was Jewish. So I saw him his name's Andrew. I saw him in the morning, and it was like 10 minutes before our panel. And I come up to him and I'm like, Andrew, how are you? My name is Mendel, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to put on tefillin? And he's like, oh man, he's like, I'd love to, but I'm about to do a panel, so I don't have time. I'm like, I know you're doing a panel. You're doing it with me. And he's like, oh, he's like, well then I guess if you have time, I have time. So it's always a fun spin, like, speaking at these big things and then coming and then like, putting out a tefillin table is always entertaining, I think. But yeah.
Is there a moment of Kiddush Hashem that you're like most proud of, like something where you felt like you made an impact? Or
I wish I could say yes, but it's not an intentional, like I said, it's not like an intentional thing for me. So I don't realize it as much. Like I said, I get a lot of these messages, but I'm not like going up there like I'm now going to put my yarmulke on my head because I want to make a Kiddush Hashem. Like for us, it's just, this is who I am. And by the way, it makes you memorable. So like, I would recommend totally nothing to do with the religion. Like if you're Muslim, if you're like, go put some funny headgear on because like, then you just go from another guy in the room to the guy with the yarmulke in the room. So even from a strategic perspective, it makes you more memorable. So I highly recommend on all fronts.
That's amazing. You've really been on an amazing journey. So let's focus a little bit. Recently, the company you built was sold, right? And, we were discussing this a little bit offline, running a Hamisher business versus running a business that could be sold. Maybe share with us a little bit of wisdom around that.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it really was kind of hashgacha pratis that I ended up being able to sell the company, and that it was a very sellable company, because like I was saying, I think our biggest strengths are typically our biggest weaknesses, and vice versa. And so because us, as like from people who haven't gone to college, haven't gone to school, we're so out of the box and we just do things, we also don't do things properly, which is a good thing because we do things that maybe are non-conventional, but then also typically like the guts of the company are just not you know, scalable or sellable or whatever. Not necessarily scalable, but everything's very Hamish, and the books aren't right, and employees are never employees. They're always 1099 people, and people are randomly doing stuff, and there's, you never pay taxes and all that. And again, the bottom line is just do stuff and just like go figure out your path. But what I will say is it's been super interesting that in retrospect, we built a really clean company, and we just W-2 employees and everything was there, and we have HR, and it was just like, I don't know why. I had no model to like go after, but that's just the way that the company was built, and the books were done right, and and so we decided to take the company to market back in November, and that was because it was in a good place. The company's in a really good place, and my focus is really primarily on Careco, and I felt like I needed somebody to really steward the company. So we took it to market. I took it to market with like a banker. So that was the approach I took. So there are people that just do M&A, and they like, they help you out with the process. This guy's been great. And it was a really cool process to learn from. So we put out a process letter. We put together a data room.
So just to give people perspective, just like you if you have real estate and you bring your real estate to market and as prospective buyers, there is this world where you have a business and you bring it out to the world to purchase your business.
Yeah. The difference is
like real estate brokers, just business brokers. That's what.
Yeah.
So you're.
Yeah, 100%. The difference is that the asset is the business, which means that instead of you giving someone a tour of a building, you got to give them a tour of your data. So that's where you put together something called a data room that has everything from like your P&Ls and just like all that stuff, your businesses and your expenses and your employees and your structure and your taxes and like your projected, like there's a lot that goes into there. And then I met with a bunch of people. We got a bunch of bids, thank God. And then I ended up feeling really good about one company. And then similar to real estate, you go under like LOI, which is like an engagement period where you're like, okay, assuming everything that you've told us is true, here's the deal that we're looking to do. And then you sign that, and then you go into a diligence phase. That can be that depending on, for me, again, thank God it was fairly straightforward because we kept a pretty straightforward business, but that's where they're going to first do like confirmatory diligence. So, okay, is everything that you told us true? We're going to go through your banks. We're going to go through your books. We're going to go through everything. Then the second thing is called quality of earnings, where they're going to do an analysis of like, is your business actually, the business that you do, is it actually worth forward looking money? So an example of a bad version of this would be, if you have 1 million customers, but every customer cancels your service after a day, but you have such a good funnel for incoming business that you just keep so you obviously have a crap business, but you just keep churning, people in and out. So that's obviously not a very good flag. But assuming that you have like normal churn and things like that, then they're going to go through that process. And then you get to the main area, which is the kind of the third stage of this, is where you actually negotiate the finals of the deal. And that's where most deals probably die if they've made it to that point. And my deal died like 4-6 times. I don't know, something like that. Kept reviving it. And that just comes down to, business negotiating. And that was a very, very fun process. And then we finally ended up closing right after Pesach's, like beginning of April.
It's very exciting. Typically in the industry, just for people's education, a business's value, how do you value a business for sale? What?
So you can value your business however you want, but typically the industry will value your business. In every industry, there's standards, and it's either going to be like a multiple of EBITDA or a multiple of revenue, depending on. So for example, like a services company is very different than a tech company. Tech companies usually go for just revenue multiples, and usually larger revenue multiples, because the upside is much greater and your margin is usually, tech margins are 80 to 90%. A services business, maybe your margins are 30%, 40%. So maybe it's going based off EBITDA, maybe it's going off. So it really depends, but there's typically just a standard. And the other thing I'll tell people is like, if you're talking to a prospective buyer and it feels like Hamish, like they probably don't know what they're doing. Like it's a very structured process. Like it's a very, very structured process. This is not the Wild West where it's like, hey, let's just come up with whatever makes sense. And because I did that, like I bought partners out of the business and we just like threw a number in a hat of what the valuation for the company is. And that was a mistake. Like, no, you don't just like decide over coffee what the valuation of your company is. Like there's a cheshbon, like there's a very specific calculation and there's going to be an industry standard. So even if you're not selling your company, but that's actually a really good point. If you're like working on, I don't know, buying a partner out or maybe bringing somebody in or like taking money from somebody in exchange for equity or the opposite of that, don't just randomly assign numbers to your company based on hopes, dreams, and vibes. Like there's a really specific structure. So do a little research.
It's amazing. That's a special journey to go on. Not too many people have this chus to experience that. In our final few minutes that we have here, so now you're in the AI revolution. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's not a hype cycle. I've been doing this since 2023. So basically, I was probably in the first cohort of ChatGPT users towards the end of 2022, and I was incorporating into my own life pretty quickly. I like built and sold a course for like a lot of money that was totally done based on ChatGPT, and I'll never forget that stage because it was at the point where ChatGPT kept crashing because there were so many people on it. It was like really early days, and I remember like I was trying to get this course done, and I needed like the script finalized because I was flying people in. We were building studios to like film this thing, and I was flying people in, and I needed to like finish up the script and get stuff going, and like it kept crashing on me, and I'm like, oh my god, like so really early days, and then the thought hit me. I actually have this documented because I texted it to Israel on February 13th of 2023. I had this idea of like this augmentation that we can do for essentially our employees in this other company, but more for the entire space. And so texted that to him. I got excited about it, kind of put it on the back burner in my brain for a couple months, and then got like an MVP going. And this is a whole nother podcast of like the evolution here, but started that later that year. So about July, started working on it. And then found a CTO, spent about 6 months convincing him to quit his job and come over. And then he joined formally in February of 24. We spent about a year or so underground, kind of building out the pipes of the company. In my space, there's HIPAA compliance. There's a lot that has to be built. And then we really came to market in January of 25. But like way back in 2023, I actually co-wrote obviously with early day ChatGPT, but I wrote this book called Unleashing Value, the Case for AI and Value-Based Care. And it's really cool to like see the ideas in that book like actually finally come alive now, because it talks about like the intersection of how I think AI is going to really make this value-based care concept that we talk on the podcast about a reality, and vice versa, where the best place for AI in healthcare is value-based care. And that stuff is really happening. Like the government is really driving a lot of that stuff now. So yeah, I wouldn't say I jumped on the AI bandwagon. What I will say is, again, I use like hindsight, where I remember during COVID, I had this like gripping feeling that there was like money to be made all around, and I did not have the experience to like grab it. I had this like really annoying feeling during that time. Like I saw it and I just couldn't, not take advantage. Like, yeah, I couldn't like take advantage of it. Not of COVID and people dying, but that time, as everyone remembers, was like super volatile and there was a lot going on. And so I started having, and this is where gut, and experiences really start coming into play. I started having that same gut feeling way back in 2023. And I'm like, this is going to be something. And this is something worth betting on. And so I was able to like use that past experience of like, I wouldn't call it failure, but like not being able to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, to be like, okay, this is that same thing. So now it's time to like take a bet. And so we started Careco back in, then, and yeah, now we're doing about 500,000 patient conversations on the platform a month. Actually just kicked off a raise, been bootstrapping up until now. We got profitable, and that's been its own very enjoyable /
very exciting. So is there any AI tips you'd want to share with anyone just across this, or anything people should know about AI that you think is important?
So that's the audience is very wide range. So the advice could be anything from, hey, if you're not using it and you're putting it off, then you're being stupid. don't knock anything that anyone tells you about AI. Also, don't believe anything anyone tells you about AI. The reality sits somewhere in the middle. Beneath the fog is the actual kind of ground of where things are. Every business most certainly can be dramatically bettered by leveraging AI. But AI at this point is like a super broad term. But I would say, like, again, it really would come down to more of a personal conversation. But the bottom line is, like, if you're not using it, then like, yeah, but also don't buy like the whole like vibe code everything hype cycle. So do some research, but definitely don't bury your head in the sand.
Okay, awesome. We're going to sign off on two final questions. Like, this is wisdom, your wisdom. Number one, now here you are, 15 years in your business journey. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey?
What's one thing that I know now that I wish I would have known at the beginning of my journey? Well, one thing I said already, which is like, you're going to be okay because you care so much. Just keep moving. Like, the only thing, we're so obsessed with ourselves these days. We're so obsessed with going to therapy and talking about ourselves and figuring out why we feel what, and going and snorting mushrooms and breathing and doing all that stuff. Like, just what like actual actions are like, what work is your actions creating? Like, focus on your output, basically. Do you have positive output or not? And that's really the only thing that matters, I think.
Okay, and what advice would you give someone putting in effort but not seeing results yet?
That's a great question. It really depends. It really, really depends, because I've seen both sides of this. The typical answer is like, just keep persevering. I've also seen where like, stop persevering. Like, I've seen that side too. We're like, don't keep doing that. Yeah, like Kevin O'Leary famously says, sometimes it's time to take the thing out back and shoot it behind the barn. But mostly that's not the case. What I would say is look at yourself as a tool. Don't look at yourself as the material. So if you are, let's say, a pair of scissors, and you focus on sharpening yourself and figuring out how you become the sharpest pair of scissors, then eventually you will be able to cut through silk, through linen, through iron, through whatever. But if you only focus on the material of like, how do I obsessively cut this very specific material, then you may end up breaking your scissors, or you may end up being able to only cut that material or not cut that material. And that's not going to be super effective for you. So like, if you're going through something, if you're being successful or not successful, how is this like, how is the experience shaping you as a human, as a tool? How are you reacting to the things that are coming your way? Are you actually like learning lessons? And that stuff is way more important than the outcome, because the outcome, if you're focusing on yourself as a tool, and sharpening your own skills, then the outcome will definitely happen. But if you're obsessing over a specific outcome, first of all, it's never that fun when you actually get there. And second of all, you're probably looking at it the wrong way.
This will be our final question. How do you stay grounded when things are going well?
Maybe I'll be able to answer that question honestly someday. I think a lot of people, or I'll speak for myself, things are never going so well in my head that it feels like, that like it can get to your head. Like, I think we're always just like on to the next thing, and what is the next problem, and like what is the next thing to solve. So I've just never been there. I can't answer that honestly.
Okay. Well, look, this has been an amazing conversation. You've been on an incredible entrepreneurial journey, and thank you for sharing that with us and the wisdom along the way. If people listen to this and enjoy this, can they reach out to me and I could try to connect, if they have good questions, you're open to speaking to people?
Look, you do amazing work out there. Like you said, I've been following you guys also for quite a few years. We even did an amazing event out here in Kingston. So anything I could do to support, absolutely, 100%.
Okay. When are we doing the next Kingston event, by the way?
It was a hit. We should do it again. It was a big hit.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll follow up then.
Sounds good.
God willing. Okay.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity. It was fun.
Yes. Take care.
Cheers.